Our panel today, Glenn Munsie, Chris Roots and Michael Maxworthy. And I'll say good morning to Glenn Munsie to start with. And Glenn, well, this is one of those weird paradoxes, mate, because I'm sitting here in French's Forest and you're the one that's out and about now. Are you enjoying the sun of the Gold Coast?
Well, good morning, Dave. Good morning to Chris when he comes on, to Maxie and all the listeners. I am Dave. I drove up yesterday to get ready for a very, very busy week here on the Gold Coast for Magic Millions Week. Of course, we've got Punters post-mortem today. The final fields come out for the 2 and 3-year-old Magic Millions races today. We've already got the field out for the debut, and that market will go up today. So we'll have 3 final field markets out today for a 10-race card on Saturday. All of the other races on Saturday already are open with tab, all in betting on those, and getting ready for a big week here. Always a huge week up on the Gold Coast for Magic Millions. The barrier draw tomorrow morning live from Surfers Paradise Beach as it happens, and then the fields, of course, the rest of the fields will come out Wednesday as we get ready for Saturday racing. 10 races on Saturday. They haven't had 10 races before, and they've moved a couple of races away, a couple of brand new races. Of course, the debut we spoke about earlier, the Syndicate race. They've just, tinkered with the program on Magic Millions Day, and it's an unbelievable concept, Dave, that has grown and grown and grown each and every year, and it keeps those horses, well, not alive, but keeps those horses the availability for this massive prize money on Saturday. I think it's $11 or $12 million on Saturday alone, and you'll see horses that 8 and 9 years of age that were, it seems a long while ago, they were purchased at a Magic Millions sale that can still go round for the big prize money on Saturday. We saw the Big Maiden on last Saturday, won by Gerald Ryan and Silent Tsar. Brett Navdala first of a double for Gerald. That's a $250,000 maiden.
Yeah, that was extraordinary to see, and hearing Sterling chat after the race that it was, part of a little plan they had, and obviously got the job done. Chris Roots is joining us as well from the Sydney Morning Herald. Chris, good morning to you, mate. We had that sort of, well, I guess you can't really call it a lull, because we had on Boxing Day and even on the New Year's break, we had those 2-year-old races with a bit of flavour towards this race series. But this sort of is the start of the year, isn't it? We get through Millions, and then suddenly we're talking autumn carnivals, aren't we? Good morning.
Morning, Dave. Morning, Muns, and morning to Maxie when he comes on. Just feels like racing's year's about to start when you get to Magic Millions on the Gold Coast. Saturday, a sort of an entree, but in years to come, I think that Saturday meeting's going to be overtaken by the Friday night before the Magic Millions. Like yesterday, another $3 million slots race. It's a great time to be an owner in Australia, and a great time to be going out and buying yearlings that they'll tell you out at Magic Millions.
Yeah, it certainly is. Michael Maxworthy, who was a part of the Sky Thoroughbred Central coverage on the weekend, joins us now. Maxie, good morning to you. Great to have you on Punters Post-Mortem. And I guess from an industry perspective, I mean, we talk about New South Wales racing a lot here on this program because it's absolutely flying, and it's good to see that Queensland racing have gone that way, and Magic Millions are stepping up to the plate.
Yeah, absolutely, Dave. It's all about prize money increases. Pretty much, mostly east coast of Australia. It's hard to keep up with New South Wales, but we are slowly, gradually getting there. And we had that King of the Mountain the other night, and these slot races, of course, emanate from the incredible success of the Everest. But talking about the prize money and the follow up to Saturday's Tab Wave Stakes Day. The main thing when being on radio yesterday, talking to a lot of the trainers, they're backing their horses up, provided they came through okay on Saturday, because that track was quite firm, but they're all wanting to back up their horses from Saturday within 7 days to this week. They're basically saying the prize money's on. If the horses are fit and healthy and they're eating up, they will back up. And we'll see that with Tony Gollan's Rising Stars that won at the Coast on Saturday, Spiritualised and La Tequila. He's going to continue to monitor them, but it's likely that they're going to line up in the Guineas on Saturday.
Okay, so there's a bit of news from Saturday. Just on the announcement, though, Maxie, just to comment before we get into reviewing what we saw at the races on Sky Thoroughbred Central and around the country on the weekend. So it'll be next year, obviously, just the Saturday, but then 2025, we will be racing Friday night and also Saturday.
Yes, that's how I understand it. That news only released yesterday. So basically, buyers of yearlings, from Tuesday onwards, they're going to be eligible to run in the Magic Millions next year for $3 million, an extra $1 million. And, of course, the 3-year-old race as well, the Guineas. So for these 2-year-olds that are competing on Saturday, they'll be able to race in the Guineas next year for an extra $1 million. So, yeah, they're going from $2 to $3 million. And then we'll worry about 2025 when that comes around. But, yeah, it's just going to be so exciting, the Gold Coast Turf Club, with all of these renovations. After Saturday, the turf's going to be ripped up. They've been growing turf for quite some time. They're ready to unroll it and place it down. And the track is going to be, well, it's going to have the same contours and same starting points as I understand it, fellas, but it's going to be cambered, like the Gold Coast Turf Club's been the way it is for so many years, one of the most raced-on tracks in this country, and it deserves a full makeover, and that's finally going to happen after Saturday. Yeah,
it's exciting. And just to Chris, I'll come to you here because obviously you've always got your ear to the ground, but I guess what this also creates is an outsider looking in that part of the world is some healthy competition. The Gold Coast, obviously, there's heavy investment in that part of the world, and I guess their friends up the M1 at the Brisbane Racing Club would be keeping an eye on things, and I guess it's like anything. If you put a show on somewhere else, you've got to continue to improve your show because dollars are limited, and I think that'll be only good for the punter and the fan of racing in that part of the world.
Yeah, the announcement yesterday, Queensland government tipping in a bit more cash. I think they said there was $42 million worth of impact on the Gold Coast economy from Magic Millions Week. So that's a massive amount of money for one event to bring in. And it's over-expanding. They had the $1 million show jumping yesterday, the polo that Munsie had to turn down because he couldn't make it up in time. So that was unfortunate not to see him riding around. Again, he'd been practising, I know, for a while on the pony out the back of the Munsie estate. So, but you'll find that 2024 looks like when the track's going to reopen the Gold Coast, and reopen for a bit of a bang. They're going to have another 2-year-old race worth $1 million in May to go working with the broodmare sales in May. So there's an ever expanding a range of races you can run in if you are making millions bought. The other thing with the $3 million slots race, it's for all 3-year-olds over 1,100 metres, and it might just encourage a couple of horses to come back a bit earlier, especially when you consider some of the fillies have to get up and going early for the Surround Stakes, which is in the middle of February.
Yeah, exactly right. Let's look at racing on the weekend. And there's already a couple of texts here about this horse Deficit, which, of course, won that Tab Wave. Trained at Rose Hill. I'll come to you here, Muns. It was a good ride by Brendan Avdulla. He was on the fence and he just found that clear air and sort of gave Ryan Maloney and Ashgrove a little bit of a brush, and then the horse did the rest.
Yes, we'd seen Deficit, of course, David. His last couple of runs at Randwick. Plenty of people saw him. Well, even go back to his first up run on Gong Day at Kembla behind Tamerlane. He found the line well there. He found the line nicely at Rose Hill behind Cavalier Charles. He didn't have a great deal of luck. Probably a little bit one-paced when he stepped up to the mile third run back in the Colour Sergeant race. He sort of was held, I thought, easily held. At his last start at Randwick in the Mark Schnell race, but he went to that race on Saturday. He was always hard in the market. When you consider he was only sort of a benchmark 78 horse in Sydney, but they're realistically just benchmark races anyway. And, I think a lot of people that stuck faithful to Deficit were rewarded on Saturday. Interesting to note, I think, Maxie, the majority of his wins have come in Queensland.
Yes, during the winter, Gerald wanted to get off some of those wet tracks in Sydney, so he brought him to Eagle Farm and he won back-to-back races over 1,800 metres. So he's had 5 wins from 19 starts, Deficit, and I think 4 of them have been over the 1,800 metres, and he's been a real good money spinner for his connections. I think Gerald said they only paid $65,000 for him, being by Schnitzel, but they knew that he was going to take a little bit of time, and they gave him something like an extra 9 months before they broke him in, and they're reaping the rewards now. He did pick up an extra bonus on Saturday too of $200,000 because he's been paid up for the Magic Million Series. So in bonuses and prize money in New South Wales and Queensland, in 19 starts, he's won almost $600,000. And Gerald said if he came through the run okay, he's going to accept for him in the Sub-Zero over 2,200 metres on Saturday.
Okay, so, and Chris, just on the Ryan Alexo stable, they have been ticking over nicely of late, haven't they? It's just, it comes down to these tracks, doesn't it?
Yeah, and also they've done a great job. They own 2 horses at the race meeting on Saturday, and they come away with the 2 big checks. So I think Brendan Abdullah would be pretty happy. They rang him a month ago and made sure he was on board with these 2 horses, and it's worked out very well for them. They've started the year very nicely. I spoke to Gerald and Sterling yesterday, and as Maxie said, the Stayers Cup Sub-Zero race is there for deficit, and they were quite happy with the way he come through. They won't know for a couple of days. It'll probably be right up until acceptance time on Wednesday, just to check where he's at and things like that. But he's won at 1,800, and the step up to 2,200 Sterling and Gerald are very confident he'll do it, and while he's in good form, especially on that track, racing up on speed might be a bit of a advantage.
Exactly right. You're on Punters Post Mortem this morning with Glenn Munsie, Chris Roots and Michael Maxwell. We'll jump back to the Gold Coast shortly. We'll come to Sydney, and I'll get a comment from 3 of you gentlemen. You've been watching races a long, long time. We know how good he is, but again, Muns, the performances on the weekend of In Rawilla. He's been the chat in the last couple of weeks. Obviously, we know on Melbourne radio there was a bit of an opinion piece about him and his style. And don't get me wrong, he can find himself in a steward's room, but geez, Exelatus was impressive in race 4. He lifts Exelatus, and what about Frumos? He gets every single inch out of these horses.
Well, Dave, do you think Connections of Broken Arrows are still getting over the fact that it didn't win at Kembla on Gong Day when Cuban Royale was given the photo? But I'm sure those people that supported Saigon on Saturday are still trying to work out how Frumos possibly beat Saigon.
Yes.
When you consider Saigon, Tommy Berry just bided his time at the back of the field there. He was on the back of Nash coming to the turn. He said, well, I'll tell you what, this mightn't be going anywhere, Frumos, on the fence. You know what happened to it the last time I was buried on the fence at Rose Hill? So Tommy got on his bike, went around the field, came down the middle of the track. Nash waited and waited and waited, got the run up inside the leader at probably about the 300-metre mark. But he just looked all over a winner, Saigon. You think, well, he'll go on with this here. And there's Nash flailing away and giving Frumos the fright of its life, and I think only right on the post was probably the point where Frumos's head was in front. I think you can go before the line, you can go past the line, whatever, and right on that point of the line, and there was absolutely nothing in it whatsoever. But Nash, much to the cheers of the punters and much to the chagrin of those that were on Saigon, they put Frumos's number in the frame.
Yeah, what did you make of, again, Nash? Chris, I know we've spoken about him the last couple of weeks, but, geez, I just absolutely love the way in which he just gets the most out of these horses.
Like, it's a little bit like art. Like, some people appreciate different sort of art. Some people want to see the classic, just a nice portrait. Nash wouldn't be your Mona Lisa. He'd be more of your Picasso. But it's just as effective and just as beautiful to watch when you're on a winner, isn't it? His style is to get the most out of the horse, and it might not look pretty, and it might not be technically correct to the eye of someone who's trying to be a technician. But geez, it's effective. Like you saw on Saturday. The one thing about the photo on Saturday, if you go onto Twitter and have a look at the photo, look at the body position of Tommy and Nash when they hit the line. Nash is fully stretched out, throwing his horse at the line, and that might have been the difference between winning and losing. Tommy's horse was just out of sequence coming to the post, and he couldn't get that final throw. Now, they're all very good at this, and quite often you see jockeys stretched right out, right over their necks, and that can make, in a photo finish like that, it makes all the difference, and that was the difference on the weekend. Nash got it absolutely right on the post. It goes half a stride past the post, and Tommy's probably got it right. That's where you get you look at it and you go, well, he's made the difference. And punters like jockeys that make differences, and that's why Nash is so popular and will continue to be popular. And if he could ride a little bit lighter, he'd really be challenging for the premiership.
Maxie, just a comment on the great Enrawilli. You've seen him plenty of times when he comes to Queensland, and we've spoken about him at length, even off air. He's a champion. Yeah,
he fits in anywhere, and he's one of those jockeys that backs his own judgment. You know, I think he throws caution to the wind a fair bit. He obviously tries to carry out trainer instructions, but if he feels it's not going to work, he'll do something else. And we're all raving about his ride on the grand middle distance horse Think It Over on a number of occasions, in particular at his final start in the Queen Elizabeth back in April of last year. Yeah, I tell you what, if you want one jockey on your horse at the 200 that's struggling a little bit, which jockey do you want on? I'd go for Nash.
Didn't Greg Radley Munns call it the ride of the century? I think he did. Think It Over? I think he did. I'd have to go back and listen to the tape. Maybe Greg had a big fill-up day on the account, maybe. But they were wonderful scenes, of course.
But the other thing with him, we all talk about the Think It Over ride, but remember the Kamantari ride where he went up the fence and bent the fence back.
That's right.
Last year, if you were to remember a couple of rides, you remember National rides. That's how much of a difference he can make. You know, James McDonald makes a huge difference in things like that as well, and Tommy Berry and Kieran McAvoy and people like that. But you know, so often you remember these Nash rides because there's a bit of daring, there's a lot of strength. You know, that's what you want when you've got your money on. You want to see the jockey at his absolute peak, and that's what you get with Nash.
You certainly do. Give us a call on 1353. Sorry, Glenn, you're about to chime in.
I was just going to say, Dave, I just got a call off air there from Corey Brown.
Yes,
and he said it's not the last little bit of the race that Nash is. He looks as though he's more effective. He said he's a smart rider.
Yeah.
And he finds the right spot for his horses there. Now, who would have been game enough, knowing the fact that the last time Frumos was buried on the fence at Rosehill, it never got out? Now, who would even have the consideration to be putting it and leaving it there on the fence when they came to the turn? He must have seen Festival Dancer. He must have just observed it and took the odds to it wobbling enough on the turn to enable him to go up inside it. Now, there are plenty of times where you've seen a horse that's, fourth the fence, they call it the coffin position at Canterbury, behind the leader, that the leaders don't shift at all. When it comes off, you're a genius. If it doesn't come off, well, you put on the stake like Joan of Arc. But he must have seen something in Festival Dancer there to give him the impression that she wasn't going to be hard up against the fence, or with the fact that, the track was a soft 7 upgraded from an 8 during the day. Typically, jockeys get off the inside at Rosehill in the straight. So he said, I'm on a horse here that probably better with the sting out of the ground. I'm not concerned about being, if everyone thinks the hard up against the fence is inferior ground.
Give us a call on 1353. Big thanks to Corey for listening. And nice little segue, we move on, but we talk about jockey styles. I mean, Corey, to watch when he was riding, one of the most beautifully balanced.
Don't start pumping his tyres up, Dave.
No, but beautifully. But I will say too, it's a bit like, and we've only because we've been listening to it all weekend, and they had plenty to talk about because there was no cricket, so there was a lot of chatting amongst those commentators on Fox. We talk about cricket styles. You see, it's all effective. They're still getting runs, but the styles in which some are more elegant than others. But at the end of the day, it just shows what exactly.
Dave, it's not just the style; it's the ability to put the horse and relax the horse.
Exactly.
And that's when you talk to John Thompson about Nash. He talks about the way he gets them out of the barriers and gets them to relax mid-race. He said, so there's always horse there for him to use at the end. So he says he can see his horses travelling better when Nash is on them. So he knows they've got a lot to give in the straight, a lot more to give in the straight. So it's those 1%ers getting out of the barriers, getting them to travel, that allow Nash to have a little bit more than a lot of other jockeys in a finish.
We're going to move on to Passagiata very soon. Maxie, just a question here because it's just come on the text line, and we are talking obviously jocks, and I guess everyone out there is always, we're not so much, we're all looking for an edge when it comes to the punt, but we've all got different formulas, and One punter here saying, "Hi guys, been watching the races closely in southeast Queensland. This Martin Harley, watched him ride last week. Very patient and very top notch. We'll be following." A name that obviously we're seeing pop up. I think he went on a Bucks party. I think he went on Mark Zara's Bucks party to Bali or somewhere, Maxie, and met his fiancée who lived in Queensland, and now he's a young Irishman, and he's moved himself to Queensland, and he's doing a lot of work with David Van Dyke. Is that right, or is he basing himself elsewhere? Or
well, he works 24/7. He's a really nice fellow, nice for an Irishman, quite quiet. When he's at the races, I don't know what he's like at the parties, but and he's very switched on, worldly wise. Of course, he made a name for himself when he moved to England, where he rode a winner of the Kingston Stakes, rode a couple of Group 1s, I think, in France. He rode Warning during the Carnival in Melbourne for Freedoms a few years ago, and I think that's where he met his fiancée, who's a Brisbane girl. So he settled here, but he has worked tirelessly for all of the trainers to get his name out there. And, you know, well, like everything, people like to sit back and wait, but they've now all cottoned onto him, and he's right up there with our better jockeys. I'd have Orman out in front. His work ethic is crazy as well, but this Irishman, Martin Harley, is going to keep him honest, I think, over the next few years. Yeah, just watching him in a race, he's picked it up really quickly. We have a lot of tight-turning tracks here in Brisbane, whereas, you know, in England, Ireland and France, they're much bigger, spacious tracks. So he's had to adapt to that, and it hasn't taken him long at all.
Certainly hasn't.
I think he went to Gatton the other day, Max.
He did.
One ride and rode a winner there.
He did. Yeah. Sharp and Power for Chris Muntz, SP260. Thank you very much.
So something goes for the
Self-interest, the only interest.
Self-interest. It's the only way. I can't remember where I put the car keys, but you can always remember what you're back to Gatton last week. Let's go back to the Gold Coast, because we saw J-Mac miss the first race, and he was meant to... he was meant to ride Wind Shadow. No, he wasn't meant to ride Wind Shadow. Avebury. For John O'Shea. But, geez, race 2, we see him arrive, and Royal Entrance was far too good there, wasn't it, Glenn?
Yes, it was, Dave. It was a dramatic shift in the market there. In the morning, Quasimodo and Royal Entrance, there was nothing between them. But Quasimodo, he was a savage drifter by race time. Royal Entrance held its spot there at the top of the market. There was good support for Works, the Annabelle Neesham runner there. There was a little bit of money for Lamiro, the bottom one. There was no love at all for Quasimodo. But Royal Entrance, I was a bit concerned about the form of the Warwick Farm race, those horses that had the start, but Barrier won. Maxie, would you say it was an advantage to be on speed there on Saturday?
No, there's absolutely no doubt about that, Glenn. There were a couple of storms on the Gold Coast late last week, and I sort of felt that there was going to be a little bit of give in the ground, because that track hasn't been recovering that well quickly, you know, after the odd storm, but it recovered very quickly, in excess of 30 degrees there on Saturday, you know, sea breeze, the track firmed up. I think it was race number 3, they went to a G3, but I think it was a good 3 throughout. Unfortunately, a number of horses didn't stretch out that well, and there were quite a few jockeys were questioned by the stewards as to why some of the horses may not have run up to market expectations. Horses like XL Door, She's a Rogue, Alentia, Resonator, Sirocco, all those horses are well in the market, and the jockeys said that they felt their horses felt the track a little bit there. So, yeah, when it gets to a good 3 anywhere, Glenn, you know, leaders, they keep running, they're very hard to run down, and that could be the case again this Saturday.
Yeah, the weather forecast up here is potential for rain, but not a great deal of rain. And considering, you know, they had 16 mils of rain in that storm on Wednesday night. On Thursday, the track was rated a soft 6. And I think Friday it was still rated soft, and you get to Saturday and you're racing on a good 3. And, you know, we talk about the ability of tracks to bounce back. Well, you know, there's no track in Australia gets as much work as the Gold Coast, and I'm sure Navesh would have been very, very happy with the way that it raced, as in bouncing back from the rain on the Wednesday night, and he's going to be concerned about what happens Saturday. It'll be interesting to see how much water they do pour into the track this week, because, you if it got very, very firm there on Saturday, and then come this time next week, they'll be ripping it up.
Yeah, and the good part about last Saturday, Glenn, was I think there was only one horse. Often at the coast they want to get off the rails and there's not a lot of room, and so often horses get badly held up in restraint. But the only one that I could see that was badly held up all day was I Am Lethal, so maybe another excuse for him. But, we saw horses lead on the rails, kick and win, so the inside part to the middle to the outer part appeared to be completely uniform. But yeah, unless you're in the top 3 or 4, it was very difficult. And I thought the run of the day had to go to the Bopper, who's found a second lease on life. Guys, Chris, being ridden quietly these days.
Yeah, no, it's in the break before that race with the horse running through the outside fence and going down for a swim in the canal.
Princess Luna, yeah,
Princess Luna.
That was extraordinary, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, what happened was Tegan Harrison got dropped coming out of the mounting yard. The horse just took off. They couldn't run the race because if the horse had got out of the canal and run back onto the track, that was dangerous. So they brought them all back, and Chris Lees was standing there, and he was really worried about how the track was playing. And in the end, it took a horse breaking the 900-metre course record to beat the Bopper. And I walked past Chris on the way back. He goes, "I wonder if my horse broke 30 home." Because it was that far back, so I think it was definitely in the 30s. I haven't seen a sectional, an individual sectional for it, but it was an amazing effort by the Bopper, and maybe he just needs that firm ground and good speed. So the biggest run of the day. I Am Lethal was very unlucky. He just got into Brendan just got into a spot and couldn't get out of it and get into the centre of the track where he's at his best, so he was probably unlucky, but the track did play leaderish. Talking to Lee Friedman, he said, until Navesh got up here, no one wanted to be on the fence at any of the meetings, and now the fence is on fire again at the Gold Coast. It just shows you what a genius Navesh is. One of the biggest losses to Sydney racing in the last 20 years. We should still have him at Rare Meat, because he got that track singing him. That's what he's going to do to the Gold Coast, and he's going to be the man who prepares the new Gold Coast circuit. And you know what you're going to get. You're going to get almost perfection. And
just on that track, there's a couple of texts here, Glenn. That outside area. So you've got the track, and then is it like a training track or a bit of a sand track?
Because they lost the inside tracks at the Gold Coast.
So that's new, isn't it?
Installation of the poly track. Dave, you'd be too young to remember, but at Rose Hill many years ago, they actually did exactly the same thing and put a poly track, inverted commas. It was called an Equitrack. Yeah, thanks, Chris. It actually went on the outside fence at Rose Hill too, when there was work being done at Rose Hill. But that's the reason they put that down there. There was very big concerns when it first went down, because it was actually reducing the width of the track at the Gold Coast. But and as Maxie will tell you, for the majority of the meetings that were at the Gold Coast, it was a race to get to the outside fence.
Yeah, it certainly was.
Yeah. Do you remember, Glenn, you'd remember when Shane Dye went on to there to win a race on a heavy track? Rose Hill, you would have been on that.
Yes, and immediately stewards then made a rule that it was you would be basically disqualified if you ran on that track again.
Let's speak.
The sectional data is available for the Gold
Bopper.
Coast. I'm just looking for the Bopper here.
I reckon he's gone about 30.7 from his last 600, about 30.7, because he was about 6 lengths off Archer's Paradox, leader to winner. She ran 31.7, so he's got to have gone a 30.7, which is unheard of, isn't it?
Oh, well, it is. Some people would say, and most people would say, it's physically impossible for a horse to run that quickly. It sounds as though, when you're clocking your own in the morning and you tell everyone, after it's just won and you put your own on it, how brilliantly it worked on the
Jocks
on the
that it went
Tuesday
25.
morning and what times it ran. Yeah.
The thing with times too is if they break 10, they usually can't do it again. That's the thing. So breaking 11s even, you probably can do that for 2 sections, not numerous, not anymore.
All right, text on the text line here about Passaggiata, who we were going to chat about before, guys. At race 3 at Rose Hill on the weekend. Muns, I'll come to you because when we had the full field in, and we spoke about this in the punters panel before, scratchings and whatnot, this was probably the go of the day anywhere in the country.
It was, Dave. Well, but even on Saturday morning, first markets went up on Saturday morning when we were doing the preview here. It was $1.65. We wrote one bet of 10,750 on it at $1.65. I'm sure that punter would be ecstatic when it got to $2.20 in the middle of the day. And you talk about horses with speed. How quick? How quick did it go? Well, it broke 11. The first early section there, and at that stage the track was still a heavy 8.
What did we make of the performance, Glenn?
Oh, it's just speed, natural speed, David. I'd say probably at about the 300 metre mark if you're on Narito, and once again a Natural Willow ride here, Narito sort of just came out of the pack and you said, well, this is going to really test this horse here, but Narito was first up and the other horse, the Great Houdini, were both first up, and they chased along. But in saying that, the winner definitely found the last little bit, but just, let fast horses be fast, Dave, and it'll be interesting to see how they, or if they even consider, trying to harness her speed to try and stretch her out. So she's had a run now at 1,000, and she's had a run at 1,100 metres, and, probably a little bit go back, one of Björn's that we saw, at the end of last year, Shades of Rose. Just let her run along.
I spoke to Björn and his team there having a round table meeting about finding their next Passaggiata at Magic Millions just afternoon, and the consensus of the table, and there was about 6 or 7 of them at the table, that she was gone at the 100. Yes. And they were really worried that she was going to get beaten, and she just found, and Björn made the point to me before the race. He said on Tuesday she worked like Shades of Rose, and he said they just don't work like that and get beaten. He said she probably didn't handle the wet track, and she's come out and been under the fine again. He said that was the most impressive thing, that she found another gear late in the thing to hold a leg's margin. She wasn't just holding on. She went away again. So that was the most impressive thing about it. And he can't wait to get her on a firmer track to show off her real speed and what she can really do. I think you might see a really fast horse once she gets on a firmer track.
You're on Punters Post-Mortem this morning with Glenn Munsie, Chris Roots and Michael Maxworthy. I'll jump back up to the Magic Millions Rising Stars, 3- and 4-year-old colts here, and Spiritualised, Maxie, for Tony Gollan. This, of course, horse came out of that Gold edition where there are obviously some excuses, and before that at Doomben behind lubrication, but just up on speed, and James Orman got the job done, and a good run too from Mob Star from well back.
Yes, Spiritualised had to bounce back. They say possibly choked down. They went over him with a fine-tooth comb. They couldn't really find anything. I think they were basically going on what Orman felt. He felt that something was wrong and that the horse, in his opinion, choked down. So they gave him a jump out on Tuesday, and he ran second in the jump out, but Orman was swinging off him, and it was Scalapini, who's a stakes winner, that sort of beat him and had to be ridden right out. So the signs were there that he'd come back, and he was able to establish the lead. Resonator was well backed, and I think James McDonald obviously did his speed map, and he let Spiritualised go, but Resonator was right behind him. Resonator came off the bit at the top of the straight. Maybe the quick backup didn't suit him, but Spiritualised was able to really kick strongly and go on with it, and we're likely to see him in the Guineas on Saturday. You're right about the runner-up, Mobstar, talking about horses unable to come from well back. He was last. He cut the corner, and he finished best of the rest. West of Africa was quite good. He settled midfield fence. He finished well. Resonator was disappointing, and as Chris mentioned, I Am Lethal, no clear running in the home straight. So certainly good to see this colt back in the winners list, Spiritualised.
Was a good win, wasn't it, Glenn?
Yeah, it was, Dave, and he was hard in the market, so punters were very, very forgiving of that failure at Eagle Farm, and they were very, very informative of the fact that James Orman had said that he thought it had choked down. If you look at its previous form, it had 7 starts for 3 wins, 3 seconds and a third. It had 1 run back. It had been hard in the market, if not favourite, basically every run it's had in its life. I was probably a little surprised Resonator was as short as it was, Dave. I think that was definitely the JMac factor that made it as short as it was when you're considering it's run at Wyong. It missed the start, but it was a $6 chance that day. It was a 20-1 chance the other day in just a 3-year-old benchmark 72. So considering, it was as short as it was just a little bit surprising to me.
Glenn, just on text here, was there any money around for Wealthy Investor, who I thought ran a really good race for Damien Lane and Jim Boehm?
No, it was sort of hovered around the 50-1 mark, Dave, but it did run a very, very good race there from the inside alley. It just kept sort of sneaking away there in the race, and it was first up in that race on Saturday. It had, its overall form as all early in its preparation. So it had 11 starts, 2 wins and 2 thirds. Well, both the wins and both the thirds had come first and second up. So it may be just a very, very, good fresh horse. And his last campaign sort of tapered off after winning his first 2 runs back at Wyong and Hawkesbury. So Damien probably just thought, it's a good chance in a race there to throw him in first up and come up with barrier 1 and got them a handy return.
I'll come to you here, Chris, because I know this is a filly that we've spoken about before, Junquera, who was, I thought, very impressive for John O'Shea and James McDonald.
Yeah, it was interesting, wasn't it? When it jumped and was outside the lead, you were sort of going, well, can it do it from there? Well, can it what? Just run a tick over 108. John O'Shea's next target's the Lightfinger Stakes with it.
Okay.
James McDonald was very impressed with it. He said it's a really nice filly going places. Isn't that filly series setting up in a month or so's time going to be a fascinating group? We're going to have all those good fillies from the spring. You've got In Secret, you've got Zugotchi, you've got She's Extreme. You can go through a lot of them. They look like they're a really good bunch, and it's going to be interesting to see who comes out in cop. And I think they're always aiming at that one race, the Surround Stakes, where they get the chance to run for that big prize of a Group 1.
And I see, speaking of another filly here, Maxi, Alenta, who, look, is off spelling, I see, on Riser, and was just a bit tardy away, and maybe she just come to the end of it this prep.
Yes, noticeably at the start, she missed the kick. She did get up into a handy enough position, but still you've got to use a bit of gas to get there, and she never really looked likely in the run, not like the first 2 starts where she dominated. I know they were much easier midweek grade, but she ran great time and she was really impressive. But sometimes, these horses having their first preparation, you don't know when it's going to end, and I think she's probably had enough. La Tequila was able to win it, like Spiritualized, she'd failed as well and had to bounce back, and Tony Gollan knew that she was better than what happened at her second race start, and I thought her effort was quite good to take out the fillies and mares Rising Star, because when you watch the race, she was handy enough. She settled third, but she was always sort of, off the bit a little bit, noticeably first to come off the bit at the top of the straight. And Chris, when horses do that, they rarely find. They usually sort of go backwards, but she came off the bit first of all, and she was strongest late. I thought it was a good performance by that filly, and I know a trainer's got a big rap on her.
Yeah, it was. She was really strong late. Like when Belarus got to the front, you thought, well, this is over, and I was really surprised at the betting in this. I could not get the favourite as short as she got to. She got to $1.65, and she was 2 starts ago. She started $5.50 or $5.60 in a maiden, a midweek maiden. She was taking on horses that were stakes horses, and just it didn't make sense to me. But I was on Belarus. I thought it was home, but the winner, like Quinto, come over the top of it. So it was a good win.
Certainly was. Speaking of good wins, Muns, and it's one of those horses that you just seem to always get a good price. Titanium Power, again, at Rose Hill, out in front, and can't be caught.
Well, Joey Pride went to his gun-for-hire rider on Saturday. Well, he seems to be the gun for hire for Joe anyway in Glyn Schofield. He's had enormous success with Coal Crusher, Taxu. Glyn's ridden for that. Rory Hutchings. Glyn had ridden Titanium Power in the past, but well, as soon as he jumped and dictated, Dave, that was nearly the end of the section. Noble Soldier was a very, very good effort in the rain, considering he was working the whole race. He made sort of half a dash, but it was a little bit similar to La Passeggiata. You probably had half a concern at probably the 250 metre mark, and at the 200 metre mark, you knew you were home with Titanium Power. Now, he's bounced back. Joe said in the post-race interview, well, he won first up where he beat Samut at Randwick, then went to the Coal Crusher race. Well, Coal Crusher sort of sat up on his outside at Newcastle and probably drove him into the ground. Joe said he lost a shoe that day, and then he's picked up cardiac arrhythmia in the Cavalier Charles race. He trialled during the week. He's now won 6 races of his 8 career wins have been on soft tracks.
Yeah, it just gets out in front routes.
Yeah, it's isn't Glenn Schofield probably one of the more underutilised jockeys in Sydney at the moment? He when he gets his chances on the right horse, he makes the most of them and shows he's still got it. And it'd be interesting to see him more regularly in Sydney. I know he's struggling to get rides, but Joe Pride's one who hasn't missed him, and when he needs one ridden and rated really well, he turns to Glenn, and Glenn gets the job done.
You're on Punters Post-Mortem with Glenn Munsie, Chris Roots and Michael Maxwell. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we're going to continue to look at the racing from the weekend, and we'll look ahead to Saturday.
The Southern Hemisphere's best yearlings on Australia's holiday playground. The 2023 Magic Millions Gold Coast Yearling Sale, January 10 to 16. It's the sale where the smart buyers shop for superstars. Graduates include Spring Carnival stars Coolangatta, Alligator Blood, Madame Pommery, Jacquinot, Ellsberg, Manzoice, In Secret, and Hong Kong champion Golden 60. The Gold Coast Yearling Sale offers the cream of the Australasian yearling crop. See the catalogue at magicmillions.com.au.
The only place to catch the very best equine superstars from around the globe, first time, every time, is right here. Live and exclusive across the Sky Racing Network.
Since 2018, 36 Group 1 winners could have been bought for $100,000 or less at an Inglis sale. That's 44% more than the nearest Australian auction house. Where will you be in 2023? Classic catalogue available now at inglis.com.au.
Always thought owning a racehorse was too expensive? It doesn't have to be. Patriot Bloodstock offers racehorse shares for syndication at an affordable entry-level price point with fixed-price training fees. Our horses are country trained, and whether your horse wins at Wagga or Randwick, the thrill is the same. We've had great success sourcing quality horses that won't send you broke, and we love first-time owners. Check out what's available at www.patriotbloodstock.com.au. Patriot Bloodstock, an authorised representative of Stable Connect. AF licence number 33696.
Light up your Friday and celebrate Lunar New Year trackside. Enjoy night racing, bands, pop-up food markets and bars, along with a lion dance performance and God of Wealth. Entry is free. Kia Friday Night Racing, January 20, Canterbury Park. Find out more at theraces.com.au.
You're listening to Sky Sports Radio and Punters Post-Mortem.
Yeah, you most certainly are. Hopefully you're enjoying your Monday morning wherever you're listening around New South Wales via our radio network, or you might be listening via the Tab app across the country. We've got a few listeners up there on the Gold Coast listening via their Tab app. Good morning to you. We'll see you, of course, later this week. Racing HQ live there on Friday and also Thursday from the Sales Complex. And I think our sister station, 4Tab, will also be there, Stephen Hewlett. So looking forward to being a part of the action up there and also seeing how this sale kicks off tomorrow. And we'll have a standard Racing HQ here from 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. That coverage on Saturday, Glenn, I know you'll be a part of. It's going to be it's going to be a big Sky Racing coverage on Sky Thoroughbred Central. There are a number of the toys being used, I guess you can call them, on Saturday with the side views and choppers and drones and slow-mo cameras. So it'll all be on display, won't it? And I think, off memory, I'm fairly sure that this meeting is always significant for Sky Thoroughbred Central, or it was used to be called Sky Racing World, because correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Magic Millions was one of the first ever showcase meetings on Sky Racing World with David Rafale many, many years ago when it started, that channel.
Yeah, well, it is a cast of thousands. Maxie will be there Saturday. Bernie will be steering the ship for us on Saturday. Bernie will be the host. Maxie and Duff will be our form experts. We'll have Ali will be on the pony. She'll be conducting the post-race interviews there on the pony. I'll be there doing the markets, not only on the Gold Coast, but also the Sydney meeting and the New South Wales provincial meeting. Mm-hmm. And I think, Maxie, Kian was at the barriers. That was a new innovation on Saturday. Kian at the barriers. And so it's a chock-a-block coverage, Maxie.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they're going to be catering for well in excess of 20,000 people. Steve Lyons was telling me on Saturday, all down the home straight section, right to the 2,400 metre start. Wow. They're going to have marquees, and of course they've got the introduction of this new race that you guys were talking about earlier, the Syndicate. They've got so many syndication marquees that are going to go right, the length and breadth of any area at all out front of the grandstand there, and right up to the 400 metre point is going to be full of marquees, housing a lot of those micro owners and whatever. As you know, they bring along two friends. It's going to be a marvellous atmosphere. The weather looks like it's going to be okay, not too much in the way of showers, partly cloudy basically for the rest of the week at the Gold Coast, so it is going to be a big day. It's Glenn getting there and getting home is going to be the problem. Yes.
You got a spare seat, Maxie?
Maxie, it's never ever a sweat getting there, Maxie. Getting home is a lot more difficult.
I remember
in that new area that they'll create there on Saturday at the top of the straight, which will be called the Princess Luna Lounge. After Saturday's effort, and for those people, that bridge that you saw Princess Luna going under is the bridge at the basically parallel to the top of the straight at the Gold Coast, which goes over the creek for you to get out of the race precinct there up to Bundle Way. And yeah, it's a lot more harrowing getting out of Magic Millions Day than it is getting in. I must admit, I did the radio from there last year because we had Richard Haynes, the host of Saturday Racing HQ, was doing the radio from a hotel room.
That's right, he was crook. He had COVID. That's right.
He had the spicy cough, and he couldn't leave the Gold Coast to go back to Sydney, so he had to do the radio. And I said, well, I'll go to the race course, and I took all my radio equipment and did my part from the broadcast box at the track, as I had done in many, many years previously with Ben's. Well, I got to the race course at 5:30 in the morning, Queensland time, and there were two blokes standing at the gate that had just left the Cassie, and they wanted to be first in the gate.
They wanted to be first
5:30
in the morning.
Did they have pocket fools ones ready to launch into the first favourite?
They did send me a message at the end of the day that they had won. I said, well, what are you doing now? It's straight back to the Cassie. Yeah.
Outstanding.
You do.
That's exactly right. No, it's good fun up there, and that's a lot of people. I'm looking forward. I've been to a Magic Millions on track for numerous years, and I'm going to be on track this year. Well,
they've broken a little bit of a tradition, Dave. By yesterday, there's usually an announcement here, Magic Millions, regarding Jerry usually says, I'm threatening to take the meeting away from the Gold Coast because the facilities aren't good enough, and there's talk with the government of building a track in a different spot at the Gold Coast. How many times have we read that release, Max?
Yeah.
I'm told there's more announcements to come this week too. I think you'll find there'll be one, maybe two more announcements from Racing Queensland about around. I don't know if it's prize money, but around meetings in Queensland. So it'll be interesting. It's sort of a watch this space. Now, Muns, you sure those two blokes' names weren't Luke and Dave that you met at the gate?
Oh, no, because they had to wait for the gates to open. If they were Luke and Dave, they'd just tell the bloke, listen, don't you know who I am? And
we know Glenn Munsie. No, I just say we know Glenn Munsie.
Yeah.
We know Glenn Munsie.
I would have just said, these blokes, Dave, I would have made you carry my bag in, Dave.
100%.
And said, they're my valets.
What I love too, boys, about that story from Glenn is he always ties it back to how much he's working. See, the crux of the story was the two blokes that got there, but he was there at 5:30.
5:30.
Just remember that. And what time are you getting there this Saturday, Glenn? Well, I'll be just waking up at the Star at the buffet breakfast. What time will you be on air Saturday, Glenn?
We'll be on air at 7 o'clock, Dave.
Perfect.
And I'll be doing it from the comforts of my room.
Beautiful. All right. And make sure too...
I've got a very, very important task, Dave. I've got to get Duff to the races.
Well, yes. That is very important. And make sure too, we mentioned Richard Haynes. He's on the Gold Coast. I know Sky Racing Active have there's going to be a number of interviews coming through via Sky Racing Active, Sky Racing 2. Possibly you may see some of those. I know they'll be all over the socials, but Hainesy, of course, he'll be doing his best to bring us all the sales side of things and the breeding side of things with his expertise throughout the week. And we'll also talk with Richard later in the week as well on Racing HQ. So just looking forward to seeing how it goes. I know we talk a lot we do talk a lot about New South Wales on this, and it will be interesting, Chris, to see how this sale does go, because away from our bubble of racing, every time you jump onto a News Limited website, or it might be a Nine Papers website, there's chat about recessions and economy and this and that, but the racing bubble, it seems to just be its own little ecosystem and be quite all right.
I think what you'll find, Dave, and sort of walked around yesterday at Magics and started talking to a few people, the top end will stay fairly strong because of the amount of syndicates there are looking for those big colts and things like that. You've now got a few people who've decided, well, we can't afford the best colts, so they've started buying the best fillies. As you see, the Valerie syndicate from Gay Waterhouse, they've got Platinum Jubilee in their Magic Millions this year. They decided to target fillies. So now you've got colt syndicates, you've got filly syndicates. So that high quality, good page, right conformation horse, ready to run early, they'll find their mark. Now, what's going to fall through the cracks? Usually, at this sale, horses with staying blood fall through the cracks a little bit traditionally, but I think there's plenty of money around, and everyone's talking positively about a lot of the books and what's there. So I sat with Francis Cook yesterday afternoon. If he had his iPad in front of him and about 4,000 horses marked, it seemed to me. So we're just talking through what they were looking at, and he was scratching his head trying to work out which ones should knock off the list rather than put on it.
And what's also happened in the last few years, Dave, at these sales is the big players, instead of bidding against each other, they've joined forces and spreading their risk, or whatever you'd like to say, and instead of got their eyes on two or three, they're going in big syndicates like Steve Grant's syndicate there and the China Horse Club and those that looking for these colts, and they've had a good bit of success this year with a few runners in the Magic Millions, that they might walk away with 8, whereas they only had their eyes on 1 or 2, and if they missed that, they'd be disappointed. So they're spreading their risk out a little bit more, and at the end of this sale, you dust yourself off and you get ready, because then you've got the Inglis Classic sale, which is in the first week of February. So those people that have missed out at the Magic Millions, well, their next look is the Classic sale at Inglis's on a much, much cheaper band of horses there. For those people that are looking, and I think there's maybe 1,200 or something horses go through here, because they've actually the sales now start here on a Tuesday. They used to start on a Wednesday, and they go through, and there's book 1 and there's book 2. So there's a huge number of opportunities for people to buy a yearling first sale of the year, and then, as I said, they've got the Inglis opportunity in the first week of February.
The Steve Grant syndicate's the Newgate syndicate that Henry Field puts together, and I think they bought 8 to 10 horses here last year, and they got 3 in the Magic Millions, and 2 of them are at the top of the market in Empire of Japan and Sovereign Fund, and then they got Royal Entrance in on Saturday. So they're looking forward to a great day, and hopefully they'll be having a bit extra to spend on Saturday night.
Exactly right. Now, let's have a look just before we get to your horses to follow for the weekend. We get to our two previews for, of course, Dubbo and Taree just on Saturday. So we've got this debut race, I should say. We've got the field for that, Getty marching, etc., all the first starters, and we'll have more information coming through. What's going to happen with these markets, Glenn? Do you know of the times in which they'll be opening?
Well, Dave, they did tell me that it would open today, and I'm actually looking at the market as we speak now. The horses are actually priced up, so the market is there. Whether or not they just want another look at it, I know they didn't want to open it over the weekend. The field came out. I think it came out early last week, but they were more concerned with the fact, with 8 emergencies and people that, didn't think they'd get a run. They'd have their horse down possibly to run on Saturday. I know, all eyes are on Steel City here, which is the third emergency for Kieran Murray and David Eustace. And I think and I'm sure I did read or hear that it'll be nominated for Sydney on Saturday as well, because it's the third emergency in the debut on Saturday. But you've got Getty there for the Snowdens. It'll be the favourite probably with Marching and Rush Hour, but Steel City will be right in there. Please don't. I'm still trying to work out how Steel City's a $21 chance in the Magic Millions.
Yeah.
As much hope as getting in the Magic Millions field as I have becoming an astronaut.
The thing with this race, Glenn, as you mentioned there, is that this field was drawn up a week ago. Like, these are 2-year-olds, and, you've got them one day and not the next. So I can see why you're reluctant to put up a market with all these emergencies. But a lot of the jockeys haven't gone down as yet, so it's a little bit of a waiting game. And the first emergency for the debut, Lamiro was unplaced on Saturday and it's drawn 18.
It now becomes ineligible.
It's out.
Oh, of course, yeah. Okay, so it's out.
It's ineligible.
Right, okay.
Well, they had that problem with the Country Cup, didn't they? They didn't vet the entries, and Tab put up a market, and there was 8 horses that weren't eligible for the race.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see whether that Steel City does get a run. You would think, given that they took these acceptances last week, there would still be a chance. We've lost Lamiro, so she now becomes the second emergency. I'm just going through the form now, and it's interesting, guys, that because of the conditions of this race where, trial winners get preference, they're actually running some of the trials like races. I've been taken with Rush Hour, Nathan Doyle's colt. He's been going really well, that horse, and he's drawn nicely.
The thing with this race, and it's probably going to develop over a few years, I think they're going to have to run certain sets of trials for these horses rather than run trials and just say if you win a trial you get in, because I can see a lot more horses wanting to get into this race, but if you run them against each other, at least you get it's what it is. The
Melbourne trainers, for example, were complaining of the fact because they don't have the number of registered barrier trials.
They couldn't hide them. They couldn't hide them this time, Glenn. Is that what they were complaining about? They couldn't.
Yeah, but they can't. There's got to be a metropolitan trial. So a lot of there's a couple of trainers who didn't actually read the rules very well, and they went to Hawkesbury and qualified them there, thinking they were very smart, and then realised they had to go for a second trial and had to go to Warwick Farm and Rose Hill, and you've seen a couple of trials where they've put 10 lengths on horses because these horses are so desperate to win to get a spot in this race, as you would be with 500,000 on the line.
The program ahead, boys. So we've got the 2-year-old Classic, of course. We've got the 3-year-old Guineas, the Magic Millions Cup, the $1 million Sub-Zero, the Fillies and Mares. We've got the Cutest Open for the 1300, the Snippets, the Syndicate for the 3-year-olds and ups, the Country Cup, and of course that debut 2-year-old Plate. That's just at the Gold Coast. And on Saturday, of course, in Sydney Town, we are racing at Rose Hill Gardens, where we've got your standard benchmark racing for 150,000 right through the board, and the highways and the midways, etc. So that's going to be a good complement to what we see up there at the Gold Coast. Now, provincial meeting, of course, at Kembla Grange on Saturday. Some horses to follow, gents, before we wrap it up. But what caught your eye this weekend, Glenn?
Dave, I'm actually going to look at one at the Gold Coast. I'll get Maxie's thoughts a little bit later, but Wild Calm, who was a little filly for Annabelle Neesham, had her first start in the maiden there for 12 months on Saturday. She'd had 2 starts as a 2-year-old in the Gimcrack and an open 2-year-old back in October of 21 and then January of 22. Big effort for a horse to try and win a race like that first go for 12 months. I thought she boxed on her right. She's got a little bit of a problem at the barriers, and one for Chris Waller, which it was a Nashua Willa ride there on Saturday, and I'll go back to it, Dave, and it was first light in race 9. He was second up in that race there. I think he's sort of ticking along all right. He's had 2 runs back from a spell. This is his second preparation in Australia, and he's got his foot right on the till.
Sensational. All right, let's have a quick look at your horses to follow, Maxie.
Yeah, well, that Wild Calm did interest me, Glenn, in that first race, the Big Maiden, because her 2 runs in defeat a year ago were sensational. I don't know what the issue was with her, but it was a bit of a task. First up, 1,200 metres off just one barrier trial, but clearly she's got loads of ability if they can keep her right. Wild Calm, I think you're on the right track there. The one that really impressed me out of last Saturday was John O'Shea's filly, which we touched on earlier. Dave Junqueira. She's got any amount of ability, and when she jumped, I thought she'd be trading at about $1.20 because James didn't move on her out of the gate. She jumped on her own accord, something that she hadn't done in any barrier trial or race so far. So she hopefully has conquered, being comfortable in the gates and jumping well. And he just sat like a statue on her. She travelled beautifully, and it was just a matter of, when he was going to give her a little bit more leather. So I'm looking forward to see her match up against the better fillies in that series coming up during the autumn.
And your horses to follow, Chris Roots?
I was taken with Ashgrove. I thought it was a really good run. I think it probably not now. We might see him later on and towards the Winter Carnival. And Jill Cuero, I really think it's going to be a horse we can follow right through. They're talking light finger stakes next with it. If it can show it's up to that, well, if they think it's up to that, if it runs before that race, you want to be on it no matter what price it is. And I think they're the 2 for me.
Okay, sensational. And boys, look forward to this week unfolding. It's going to be great to have you a part of the coverage. Glenn, of course, You're already up there on the Gold Coast, so no doubt to any news you'll be ear to the ground. Maxie, same with you. And Chris, looking forward to seeing all 3 of you later this week.
Yep, they'll all be at the beach nice and early tomorrow morning, those on the coast, Dave, for the...
what time?
I think just after 6 a.m. they're going to have, they have the horse races, and I think the Harrovian is going to be there, the retired, country champ. I know he did so well under Edmonds at the Gold Coast, but he just had an incredible following. Probably his best performance was in defeat in an All-Star Mile, and I think Luke Dittman's going to be riding him in those beach gallops at Surfers Paradise at the barrier draw tomorrow morning.
Okay, and what time is the actual barrier draw, guys?
It is on to...
Is it 10 o'clock Queensland time? Is it 10 o'clock Queensland time?
10 o'clock. I think it's usually 9 o'clock Queensland time.
Okay, which will be 10 o'clock our time. So we'll wait and confirm that, because we're going to hope to bring you that barrier draw live on Sky Sports Radio tomorrow. We'll take the coverage from Sky Thoroughbred Central, so we'll get the timings done and dusted there. But we'll see what the schedule's like for that. So it'll either be 9 o'clock Queensland time, which is 10 o'clock here in New South Wales, or 10 o'clock Queensland time, 11 o'clock here in New South Wales.
I'll tell you, I've got the day sheet for Tuesday here. And it is telling me that the barrier draw is 9:45 a.m. to 10:45 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time.
Okay, so that will be 9:45. So
9:45 here. Yeah.
So 9:45 in New South Wales. Fantastic. All right, well, we'll try and bring you that live tomorrow morning as much as we can on Sky Sports Radio. Have a great day, gents, and see you later this week.
Okay, see you
Stay
guys.
hydrated, Dave, when you get here.
Yes, plenty of H2O. Don't worry about that. I'll be there later this week, Glenn. Looking forward to it. And it's 10:12. 2 meetings in New South Wales today. Dubbo and Taree. We'll head to those previews next.